afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Lindsay, and I work on higher education issues here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. It's really an honor for me to moderate this panel, which is titled, Even in Texas, Rooting Out Propaganda and Indoctrination in the Classroom. Well, as our choice of title indicates, we're going to be talking about the proper relation between American democracy and American education. Now, fortunately, we have some guidance on this question. Our third president and the author of the Declaration of Independence said the following on this question. He said, quote, "Any nation that expects to be both ignorant and free expects what never was and never will be." Right? Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, agreed with Jefferson. In fact, Lincoln said, "All honor to Jefferson." And this statement is attributed to Lincoln on the relationship between American democracy and American education. And the statement is this: the philosophy taught in the classroom in this generation will be the philosophy practiced in the legislature in the next generation. So, that leads to the question, what is the philosophy that's being taught in Texas classrooms today? Right. Well, to answer this question, we have four honored guests whom I'd like to introduce before they start to make their remarks. To my immediate left is Dr. Mary Bone, who has served on the Board of Trustees for Round Rock ISD since 2020. During her time on the Round Rock ISD board, Dr. Bone has come under fire for doing some terrible things, three of which I'll mention here, and just try to bear with me. First, for some reason, she's fighting for higher academic standards. Second, she's trying to protect our children from indoctrination. And third, for some reason, she's very intent on protecting parental rights. Well, as an academic, I know we say in education, no good deed goes unpunished. And Dr. Bone has suffered for this, but she persists. She's fighting, and we need more of her. In her spare time, she's a consultant for NASA and is also an associate professor for the University of Southeastern Norway. She received her bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering and her master's and PhD in systems engineering. So as my granddaughter would say, she studied real stuff. To her immediate left, the Honorable Brandon Creighton. Senator Creighton serves for District 4. He's championed a 21st century curriculum for Texas to increase rigor and to keep political agendas out of the classroom. In addition, he has worked to deliver balanced budgets for the state of Texas, and he's also authorized pro-taxpayer legislation. As you probably know, he implemented the strongest ban on DEI in the country. Senator works as an attorney and a real estate developer in Conroe, where he lives with his family. To the senator's left is the Honorable Jared Patterson, who serves as Texas State Representative for House District 106. Representative Patterson champions fiscal responsibility, individual liberty, the right to life, and the fierce spirit of independence, which has made Texas the greatest nation in the world. During his time in the legislature, Representative Patterson has been an author of legislation to increase border security funding, to lower property taxes, to support our first responders, and to protect children from woke indoctrination. Representative Patterson is a proud graduate of Texas A&M University. And last but not least, at the far left, this may be the only time you've been to my far left, Andrew. Is Andrew Brown, the Associate Vice President of Policy at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Andrew has dedicated his career to serving vulnerable children and strengthening families through community-based and liberty-focused solutions. As an attorney, he's represented children in the child welfare system, he's advocated for the rights of parents, and he's helped build families through domestic and international adoption. His work on international law and other child welfare issues has been published in leading legal journals, as well as in respected media outlets. Are there still any respected media? I'm sorry.
There used to be.
You beat us to the punchline.
Please join me in welcoming our panel. What we'll do is I'll start out with individual questions for each of our panelists based on their experiences. And of course, you other three are free to add anything you want. As we do this, I'll just go in order here. Starting with Dr. Bone. Having served on the Round Rock ISD since 2020, right, and now running in 27 counties for the State Board of Education, correct? Right. What are you hearing and seeing regarding the indoctrination that's happening in our K-12 schools today?
So how much time do I have? So I'm actually seeing and hearing a lot. In fact, right before this, you and I were talking about an article that just came out through TPPF this week, and it came out last week in the Daily Wire. And in my own school district, there's a Mexican-American Studies, which was opened by the State Board of Education. It was passed by the State Board of Education, I believe, in 2018. But in my district, they're using that to teach that our immigration laws are oppressive. So that's what all the students in that classroom are learning. Also, in my own daughter's school, which again is in the district that I serve, they have multiple transgender teachers. So they go to school with male teachers that are dressing up as females, and they go into those classrooms every day. I can only imagine what those students think and feel. I do know that there's been a lot of talk about, how do the students feel being in those classrooms, and how do the parents feel? Lots of the students, when we talk to them, they just don't want to talk about it. They know that there's going to be retaliation if they do. They're going to be called bigots. They're going to be called, sometimes if they're white, or even if they're not white, they're going to be called white Christian nationalist. So the name calling, and they know that that's going to come from both the students and the teachers. We're also seeing, we had the issue with boys going into the girls' private areas. And you all might know this or might not, but there are no policies still at the state level about who can use the private areas in the public schools. In fact, there's debate in my school district about one of the transgender teachers being seen going into the female restroom, which they're not even supposed to use the female student restrooms. So that's a sampling of what we're seeing. Of course, we still have books. I will tell you the other thing that's popping up in the books. You've probably heard about the pornographic books, but maybe Jared, next session, this will be your next thing. Now we're seeing the whiteness books. Now there's books that are attacking you if you're white. If you are white, you are bad. But you can solve that problem. There's a lot of ways you can do that, these books say. So these are the types of indoctrination that we're seeing in our public schools. And as you can see, the attacks, they just keep coming. So, we get the pornographic books, working getting those out, and now you're seeing these attacks on just your color of your skin. And what we're hearing is these students, the students say the worst thing you can be in school right now is a straight white female or male. And so lots of them are leading them to the LGBT because they want to have an identity that they won't be called names by their peers or by their teachers.
I guess I will say thank you. Although that's really alarming news. And I know you have other things that have happened to you, and I hope as we go through this period today that you can tell us more about what you've experienced. Thank you. Let me turn to Senator Creighton. Senator Creighton, diversity and equity and inclusion are really the banner under which so many woke policies have infected both our universities and K-12 and the business community and the medical schools. How is SB 17, the bill that you got through that bans DEI, how is that going to carry on the battle against it? And second, is there anything additional we need to do?
Well, many of you followed the DEI battle in this last year, right, in the legislature. It was an 8-hour debate that is just underscores the 100 steps through the process it takes to get a bill to the governor's desk. But you know, we got our office. We got mocked and taunted and challenged, and arrows, you know, shot at us just for filing the bill. We worked extensively on the best, as we all do as bill authors. We worked on the best language that we could come out of the gate with. And we know that, you know, collectively, we know that DEI, these diversity, equity, and inclusion units across the state have been weaponized against not just other vulnerable minority populations and vulnerable, you know, groups, affinity groups on campus, but there was collectively and essentially a neon sign above the door of HR for every public university in the state of Texas that if you're applying as a professor and you're unwilling to sign a leftist, Marxist loyalty political oath, you need not apply. Now, that agenda alone, right, would create a gateway, right, a set of gatekeepers to begin to change quickly the culture on all of our campuses across the state. And if you got through that gateway, then there's the CRT element that's going on in the classrooms that is designed to front load the corporate world with new hires that have a completely different indoctrination mindset to change the boardroom, the marketing divisions, and pollute, you know, corporate America, starting with the economic engine of North America, Texas. So we started that effort, and it was a long road. It was very surprising to a lot of the Democrats on the Senate floor that quite frankly, I felt were underprepared and loaded with fake manufactured leftist narratives, but no facts. Imagine that, right? Anybody heard that lately, right? Those same members that were taunting me for the effort, they found very quickly that, unfortunately, you know, UT had 379 employees making $9 million a year. In 10 years of DEI units, minority faculty recruitment and hiring went from 3.5% to 1.7%. So we're going backwards on their mission, right? At $9 million a year cost to you, just for that campus, right? A&M had excluded all Asian American students from DEI strategies. Texas Tech was firing professors simply for pledging to treat every student equally. So you talk about a concerted effort to commandeer our university campuses across this state. Most of the members on the Senate floor thought I was going to be talking about Berkeley, not our public universities right here in this great state. And that's why we're finding incrementally that conservatives have been asleep for a long time, because we're not natural, you know, we don't burn cities down, right, when we get mad. But we have ceded control to education and healthcare, and we haven't developed a deep bench. And we have changed that. We have changed that. So today we're going to talk about the reform mindsets of not just, you know, Representative Patterson and myself and our very distinguished, competent panelists, but we're going to talk about victories and immediate change on K through 12 curriculum, getting woke out of the classroom and fighting back on what DEI was designed to do from the start.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Patterson, would you do a couple things for us here? Would you first explain HB 900, on which congratulations? And also, would you talk a little bit about the ongoing appeals of, against the new law, and what you think the next steps are that we need to take to protect our children from sexually explicit materials.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. This is a perfect example of how a citizen can meet with their representative and have a great result for the students in the state of Texas. This all started because two moms came and met with me in my office and explained to me what they had found in their school. That's what started this entire chain of events that happened for about 18 months leading up to this coming session. Through meeting with different parents, different teachers who were concerned about this, but didn't feel comfortable bringing it forward for fear of repercussions for their children or for their jobs. We were able to dig in and find a vast array of pornographic materials in our public schools that our children have access to. And it's not just that they have access to it, it's that they have access to it without their parents being there. How many parents accompany their children to the school library when they go have their library time, on campus, right? And so it was a big, big issue. We fought it for 18 months leading into the session. And I was very pleased that Speaker Phelan in the Texas House made it a legislative priority for the House to have House Bill 900, the Reader Act, which did a number of things. Number one, it put parents in the rightful place at the top of the pyramid in terms of who's in charge of their kids' education. Very, very clear that is the case. And number two, it made it very, very clear that obscenity is not a First Amendment right, and that kids don't have a First Amendment right to see obscene materials in schools. So that was a huge win. But it did a number of things. It forced book vendors to rate library materials that they are selling to school districts. This came out of a dare from one of the largest book vendors in the nation that I met with in my district office, who said, unless you stop us legislatively, we're going to continue to do this. And Representative Shaheen and I were in that meeting, and we said, okay, we'll take you up on that. So they have to rate these books according to their sexual content. If they're sexually explicit, they cannot be in the schools at all. If they're sexually relevant, things that you and I would not agree or would agree that are not obscene in nature but still deal with sexual content, then those have to require parental controls. So it's not after the fact, it's up front. The parent has to say that that's okay for my child to see. And then it required the State Board of Education to set, for the first time ever in the history of the state, mandatory collection development standards for our public school libraries to make sure that there are some standards in place for this type of obscene content and other things as well. Now, I'm very proud to say that the State Board of Education passed those back in December of last year. It had a January 1, 2024 deadline on it, and we had to push and push and push, but we made that deadline to get those mandatory library standards in place in the state of Texas. The reason that was important is we knew that the left was going to go all out and fight us through the court system. Because I think a lot of people have this idea that when you craft legislation, when you write something down on a piece of paper, that solves the issue. And nobody that's really involved in this process really believes that. But I think a lot of people do believe that. It's got to go through the rulemaking process. It's got to go through the courts. It's got to go through all of these things. So it is a multi-year process to get these things done. And that's where we are today. So we were sued by two bookstores who probably don't even sell books to schools. But we were sued by these two local charming little bookstores about how the big bad state government is coming on and going to hold them accountable for the sexual materials that they're selling to put in the hands of children. I mean, how dare we require a government vendor to actually, have some requirements if they're going to make money selling books that are going to be in the hands of children. And so they sued us. It went to the Fifth Circuit, went before a small panel of judges, and we didn't really have a favorable outcome on that. So the piece related to vendor accountability is not in effect right now. Now, the latest that we've heard is that that's going to go before the entire Fifth Circuit. We hope to have a better solution there from the Fifth Circuit. If not, then I believe that we should take this directly to the Supreme Court, because we crafted this bill specifically based on existing Supreme Court precedent related to FCC guidelines. If you have a television show on television, you can't show certain materials, you can't show certain things or say certain words on television because a child may be present. Same thing on the radio. You can't say certain things over the radio because a child may be present. We know children are present in the school library. It's for children. Yet, these vendors don't want to be held accountable. So happy to dig more into that. I hope that answered your question. But the long and short of it is that we're still just in that legal process piece, weighing it out. Meanwhile, the State Board of Education did a great thing, passed mandatory library standards for the first time ever that have a lot of these things in it, saying that parents are the ones that are in control, that obscenity is not a First Amendment right, and oh, by the way, you can't have this junk in the school library.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. Andrew, well, first to the audience, are you familiar with the expression, the long march through the institutions? The Marxists in the 1920s and 30s in Europe, they looked at Marx's emphasis on economics and said, it's not working. And it's not working because the middle class, they're satisfied. They're getting pay raises and health insurance. We have to do something else. So the long march through the institutions associated with people like Antonio Gramsci and others, the goal was take over the major institutions. 100 years later, I am very sad to announce they've been pretty successful at that. So Andrew, my question for you is, how did we get to this point?
And I think you framed that perfectly. What we're doing right now is traditional, what I would consider rational, normal Americans and Texans, we're mounting a counteroffensive because, as Senator Creighton said, we've been asleep for a long time and we didn't know what was happening right under our noses. I'm a child welfare policy guy. I don't do education policy, but one thing I love about being a conservative in child welfare is there's not many of us. I also hate that because this is an area that I passionately believe that conservatives need to be involved with. And I'll often tell people the reason why the foster care system in this country is so messed up and why it's chewing up kids and destroying them for life is because conservatives disengaged on foster care policy. And we ceded it entirely to the left. And we've seen this in institutions across the spectrum. Education, the medical establishment. I worked on Senate Bill 14 last session, which banned gender modification procedures on children. The American Pediatric Society, the American Medical Association, all of these institutions that people look to and say, okay, these are the professionals, these are the experts, these are the doctors, they're filled with radicals who are pushing pseudoscience, who are pushing things that are demonstrably harmful to advance an ideology, and that is by design. It's not an accident. The left, and especially the radical factions within the left, have done an incredible job of taking over the institutions and digging in. And now we're trying to root them out, and huge thanks to Senator Creighton and Representative Patterson, because they're leading the charge on this much overdue but much needed counteroffensive to get that thought and that ideology out of these institutions. And it's not just the education system, although the education system, I would argue, is probably one of the most important areas because that's where the youth and the future leaders of this country are being indoctrinated and corrupted by the ideologues who are openly flaunting the rights of parents. And again, by design, you look at some of the history of public education and the early thinkers in public education, and they were very outspoken that our goal is to be the primary institution that shapes America's youth and shapes future Americans. We need to take that responsibility away from the parents. And that's a fundamentally Marxist ideal of we separate the children from their parents, you undermine the authority of the parents to direct the care and upbringing of their children, and you create the citizens that you want for your utopian society that you're trying to build. And that's really what we're fighting against right now.
Thank you, Andrew, and I think you're absolutely right. Marx himself says in the Communist Manifesto that the revolution will bring with it the dismantling of what he calls the bourgeois family, meaning us. Mm-hmm. Yes, all right, thank you. Back to Dr. Bone. given your 4 years in the trenches here on the board at Round Rock ISD, why do you think school districts are getting away with disregarding laws that are already on the books? Right? Why aren't they protecting students?
That's a good question. And it goes to some of what you just said, where our schools have been taken over. I actually call them the mafia, because it's two different groups. Yeah, it's true, it's the education mafia, but you have to realize that it is partly these left radicals that have taken over, but unfortunately we also have what I call the Green Party, and it's people that might look like you and I, but they're just following the money. And you guys could probably tell me how much of the budget in the state of Texas goes to education. Do you guys know?
It's now at 53% of $350 billion.
Yeah, thank you, because they're the experts, so they said it, not me. 53% of the budget. And I think what we have to realize as adults is that if you're a crook, where are you going to go for the money? Our kids are being fleeced. They're stealing our kids' money. So this isn't just about their hearts and minds. This is literally about stealing their money that is dedicated to their education, but it's being stolen. So when you have folks like me that are in the trenches, and we've tried to fight to get laws followed that these nice gentlemen pass, and ladies I see in the back, we can't get any help. And it's why I'm running for State Board of Education, because I have pushed every button. As you said, I'm a systems engineer by trade, that's what I do. So I started digging into the laws. And at first, they didn't like that, by the way. The education system was like, you don't need to read that, we can tell you, TASB can tell you what that really means. Yeah, and they would actually point me to TASB articles, and I said, well, I'm lucky, I learned how to read English, and I can go directly to the laws. Yeah. I write requirements for a living for the Department of Defense, so I can read laws and I can understand them, and I would push the buttons that the laws said. Some of the laws told me to go to my county attorney, so I went to my county attorney. Some of the laws told me to go to the Texas Education Agency, so I went to the Texas Education Agency. Some of the laws said I had to go through my own school district, so I went through my own school district. And what I need you guys to hear is that I have pushed every button. I have pushed every button that the laws have given me, and our district, remember in the first question, what I answered, my district is still doing everything. We have a problem. We do not have law and order in our schools. We need law and order in our schools, and we need to demand it. It is time tomorrow. The other colleague of mine, the other conservative on the board, we actually will go and tell these nice folks, we don't need more laws right now. We need the ones that are there to be enforced. We have an accountability issue in our schools, and again, it goes back to the money. And when I sit up here and when I say this, I become public enemy number one to a lot of people. Real estate people, the education people, the book vendor people. It's very dangerous. And you know what? That's why they've had us sleeping. They're putting you to sleep. And I get heat back. They're going to tell you she's a liar. They're going to smear my name. They're going to come after me. And they're going to discredit me. Because they want to put you guys back to sleep and say, don't listen to her. Don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she's talking about. We're helping the children. We love the children. They do not. They are stealing our children's future. They're stealing your grandchildren's future. They're stealing our future. They're stealing the future of America. And again, it doesn't matter what laws they pass, y'all. If we're not going to enforce them, and hear me, I have filed grievances. I had a lady right before this. She's filed grievances. Or you knew a lady that filed grievances. Parents file grievances, they don't work. And then we also need to take to heart that school choice, I'm a huge proponent. I'm one of the few trustees in the whole state of Texas that actually testified for school choice. But what we know about school choice is most of the students in other states still stay in our public schools. The public schools have to get their act together. And we need all of you to get involved. And you need to support your local trustees, because I will tell you, you know what they do to local trustees like me? They kick us off the school boards. And by the way, remember, these are other conservatives are going to tell you. They're going to try to kick people. I don't know, they smear our names. They're radical. They don't care. They're power hungry. I have a PhD in engineering. I'd rather be at my job at NASA right now but we got to fight for our kids. And again, guys, it's the money with the left indoctrination. Those two groups are working together. And again, TEA is not stepping up. There's no law. Your county attorneys are not stepping up. Your district attorneys. Nobody will touch your school system. You all are going to have to demand it. We're going to have to demand it. And we're going to have to work to get laws that demand it. Laws to enforce laws. That's a lovely solution. It's not super Republican, but it's going to have to happen maybe for a short period of time to get our schools back in order.
Thank you, Dr. Bone. Senator Creighton, last session, you took on the task of carrying Senate Bill 8, which was your parents' Bill of Rights and really served as the first draft of what later was the school choice bill. Question for you, how can parental rights push back against the indoctrination and woke ideologies in the classroom?
Yeah, well, great question. I'll certainly jump on any opportunity to talk about giving our moms and dads and our guardians of our kids across the state, conservators, whoever's in charge of making decisions for these kids. It's not government, right? It's not institutions. It was fascinating in our education hearings how many stakeholders came in to try to defeat Representative Patterson's bill against pornographic library books, and Senator Paxton carried the bill in the Senate. The Texas Association of Public School Librarians were working to defeat the bill. You folks, when that's happening, we've got to pack a lunch and seriously plan for battle, right? And we need a couple of hundred of you running for school board across this state in every district, right? And I would say it's happening. There was an awakening through COVID, right? And it's incredible how God works, right? Because through that global pandemic, as much as we could look in the rearview mirror and say about lockdowns and shutdowns and everything else, that at the end of the day, you know, we had a survival rate of 99.7%, right? And all the destruction that caused. Parents had an awakening because they weren't just working on homework assignments at night for their kids, they were working through the curriculum. How long had it been since parents had been in a full day of classroom instruction with their child? Understanding not just what they're being taught, but who was teaching them and what the agenda was. Because it became very clear in the education landscape across this state and this nation, it changed. And Lincoln's quote that you opened with is directly tied to that, right? Because those voices and that ignited grass fire, that showed incredible results to the legislature. You all will hear these bills that we mentioned today, and you may collectively think, well, it's about time, right? When we talk about these bills passing, it doesn't mean that you didn't have strong grassroots advocates and members in the legislature, conservators, reform-minded members working on these efforts year after year after year and stumbling through the process with the stakeholders that you're talking about that are always chasing the money, fighting for the institution, and never bringing up the child. Not once in our hearings, these stakeholders that constantly work against our bills to reform public schools and our universities that affect our future workforce, right? It's either school to work or school to prison. And there's not much in between with what we're seeing. And we don't want to lead the nation in what we're leading now in Texas, fast food job creation. We want to lead the nation in job creation and change lives from a generational standpoint, and that is found in the classroom. So the Parental Bill of Rights lets parents, it doesn't let parents do anything. God ordained moms and dads with the decision-making authority over these kids, and they are taking that back from government institutions that have long ago tried to be the savior, and those that were working hard to create that shift. And Texas is not going to allow that to happen. So the Parental Bill of Rights that also had the school choice provisions of 60,000 education savings accounts for special needs and free and reduced lunch kids, homeschool kids, public to private, those that are already in private school, have a fighting chance and their moms and dads to customize an education that's best for them. 60,000 of those education savings accounts out of 6 million public school kids. In our 6 million public school kids today, 83% are performing below grade level. And you have the interest, the stakeholder interest and special interest fighting against that. How do they sleep at night? Yeah, really. Knowing that. How do they sleep at night knowing that Texas should never follow 32 other states, 31 other states on anything, including standing strong for our moms and dads and our students? So with the Parental Bill of Rights, we're going to take back not only our classrooms in knowing that they, in the public schools, the moms and dads would have a grievance process and understand that we will not get indoctrination out of our schools until we have parents that know what their kids are being taught and who is teaching them and what the agenda is. And that bill would allow that to happen.
Thank you, Senator Creighton. Your answer reminds me of a debate that happened about 30 years ago on national TV. Senator Phil Gramm, Texas, right? Remember him? He was debating a national representative of the teachers union. And Senator Gramm said, I'm for school choice because nobody cares as much about my children, nobody loves my children as much as I do. And the teachers union rep said, you're wrong, Senator. He said, I am? She said, yes, I love your children as much as you do. And he said, you do? And she said, yes, I do. And he said, good, tell me, what are their names? That was the end of the debate. I think they cut to commercial at that point. Okay.
And we all know that Randy Weingartner does not love our kids more than
no.
we do, right?
Amen. Representative Patterson, tell us here, how do you think that the issue of school choice and the issue of sexually explicit materials in the classroom relate to each other?
Yeah, well, there's a huge link to all of this indoctrination, whether it's through the critical race theory that Senator Creighton's been a leader on, removing it from our classrooms. Yes, that's right. Or whether it's the sexually explicit materials in schools. There's a key link here because so many of these districts know that they have a captive audience and they can do whatever they want to do because they can outlast the parents. One of the bills that we filed last session would have created an ombudsman for the parent to be able to apply the law and enforce the law with the school districts, kind of like what you're talking about, because parents are at an incredible disadvantage. The school district will run the clock out on you. The school district has unlimited resources that they take from you forcibly through taxation to run out a lawsuit. And most parents just don't have the means to file a lawsuit, to hire an attorney, to do all of those things, to make the school districts follow the law. So, I can't think of another institution or another industry where you inject competition and you get a worse result. And so if we can just inject that competition, I believe that not only do we have the ability to get some children who aren't in the best schools from an educational standpoint, we'll be able to get them pulled out, we'll be able to get them the education they deserve. But in school districts like where I live, in Frisco Independent School District, where the education piece is not really the problem, it's the indoctrination piece that's in the problem, I need that big stick, that threat to go up against my school district to say, oh yeah, I'll just pull my kid out. And then there goes the dollars, which is what they truly care about. That's what they truly love, is the dollars, not necessarily the kids. And so, that's what we have to have. We've got to inject that competition there, that threat of, whether or not I'm going to pull my kid or not, the threat of being able to do that is something that could go a very long way. And look, I fought my own school district for 18 months, Frisco Independent School District. It took me less time to get the Reader Act drafted, passed through the House, passed through the Senate, and signed by Governor Abbott that it took me to pull explicit books out of the schools in Frisco Independent School District. Think about that. You ever heard the term an act of Congress? It literally took less time to get that bill through the process than it did to pull a lot of these books off the shelves in Frisco Independent School District. So we've got to have that competition interjected there, not only for educational reasons, but to combat the woke indoctrination. If all these parents find out what's going on in their public schools and they've got the opportunity to pull their kids out of that, you're going to see a radical transformation in our public school system.
Thank you, Representative Patterson. Andrew, you've been tracking the public response to a number of policy issues at TPPF. Tell us about the public's response to this indoctrination issue and whether and how it's informing policymaking.
Yeah, and to answer that question, I'm going to make Brian Phillips, our Chief Communications Officer, proud. He always says when you're talking to the media, always answer the question you wish they asked rather than the one that they did ask. But this will answer your question. But I want to go back to Senator Creighton's points about the Parental Bill of Rights. That was a hugely influential piece of legislation that passed this last session. But it also shows you how insane the timeline we live in right now is, that he had to even pass a Parental Bill of Rights in the first place. Parental rights is, I think, the strongest weapon that we have to combat indoctrination. And why is that? To quote Justice Sandra Day O'Connor in the U.S. Supreme Court, the rights of parents in their relationship with their children to raise their children is one of constitutional dimensions. She said it is perhaps the oldest fundamental right that has ever been recognized by the United States Supreme Court. I argue that it predates the Constitution itself. The family is one of the only institutions in our society that you don't need currently government permission to form. You don't have government unless you have families. Families come together, families start living near each other, they create a society, and all of a sudden that society grows to the point where, oh, we need to have some type of system to govern our relationships with each other. If you don't have strong families and strong communities, you don't have a government. Government is downstream from families. It's downstream from parents. And the reason that I'm really hopeful for the future, to answer your question, is because of COVID. Parents saw what's going on. They saw the man behind the curtain, and they got pissed off. And they said, hold up, these are our kids. I make decisions for my children. And they started exercising their parental rights again. They stopped ceding their right to raise their children, to educate their children, to form their children in faith, to the educational systems and the other clubs and groups that their kids were part of. They took their power, their God-given power, back. And now we're seeing legislatures reacting to that, because they're talking to their members, and their members, like we have on stage, are responding. And that, to me, is what we need to keep leaning into, is parents exercising their rights and telling the teachers and all these folks who are trying to say, no, we know better than you do about how to raise your kids. The hell you do. I'm my parents' kid. Or, I'm my parents' kid. I'm my kid's parent. I'm getting fired up right now, y'all. But it's when we're able to do that we are at our most powerful. And the left is now seeing it. I've seen countless articles coming through from leftist institutions and advocacy groups that are now trying to say, well, if you say parental rights, that's a racist dog whistle. That's a Christian nationalist dog whistle. They're trying to make parental rights a dirty word because they know they can't beat it, because even when we have to go to litigation on it, which we've done at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, we win every single time. And our state Supreme Court is one of the best in the nation on parental rights. So my message to parents right now, exercise the Parental Bill of Rights that you got from the Texas legislature, but more importantly, exercise your God-given constitutional rights to raise your kids as you see fit.
Thank you, Andrew. Dr. Bone, talk about the Texas State Board of Education for a minute here. Do you think they could play a larger role in ensuring that students are educated and not indoctrinated in Texas? And if so, what would you tell the board to do right now?
So yes, I believe the State Board of Education could play a larger role. And when it goes to parental rights, some of it is parents just not even knowing their rights. Lots of parents think, I have to send my kid to school, right? Like my kid has to be schooled. In Texas, they may not know, the homeschooling laws. So one thing is just educating. And the State Board of Education is our only elected body. It's 15 members, and it's your only elected body that is fully dedicated to education. These fine gentlemen, I don't know how you guys do it. You guys have all kinds of things that you have to look at. I don't know how many committees the Senate has and the House has, but you guys have all kinds of committees that you're on. You guys are not fully focused on education. But the State Board of Education is fully focused on education. And I think they've abdicated their duties. If you go and look, lots of the laws, like your Reader Act, actually gave the State Board of Education that they had to pass the library standards along with the Library of Archives. So the State Board of Education, I think we need more representation, enforcing parental rights, helping parents, giving them knowledge of what their rights really are in education. So just informing parents is a simple thing. Lots of people may not know, too, the State Board of Education sits right alongside the Texas Education Agency. Mike Morath or his representatives are at those meetings. And it's the same for you all, where you all may not see the Texas Education Agency at every committee hearing you have. I know in education, lots of times they're there, but at the State Board of Education, the TEA is there, and TEA is your enforcement mechanism of the laws of the Texas Education Code. So the State Board of Education are your only elected officials that you can hold accountable to make sure that there is law and order in the schools. So I would tell them right now to enforce the laws that we have, apply pressure to the Texas Education Agency for the laws that are on the books to enforce them. I mean, you guys pass amazing laws. I'm sitting up here going, oh, I love these, and then I go back to my school district, I have a meeting tonight, and I'll have parents there, and I'll be like, I'm sorry that these aren't being enforced, and there's nowhere to go. So the state board could just step up. I will say, too, the state board could also just use their voice. If you go back to COVID, when kids were being masked, when kids were not in school, our State Board of Education did not say anything. And I think we need our State Board of Education to really step up and own the education system in Texas and really take to heart that they are your 15 representatives that have a voice, a state-level voice, directly connected into the governor, directly connected into the Senate and the House, and they should be advocating. They should be in your guys' office advocating for what the school districts need. So I actually say lots of the issues that you're seeing as a trustee, I actually put on the State Board of Education and not necessarily on our representatives because I haven't seen them working necessarily as much as I think they should be. So those are the things I think they could be doing, is working with the legislators and taking back their power. Go look in the law. You can go Google in the law. You can go search for State Board of Education and see. They also have, there's laws already in place where they should be able to expose in the budget all the different areas that these school districts are spending. One of the things I am a big proponent of is I think all the lawsuits that they settle should have to be exposed, very high visibility in the school districts. We have settled multiple six-figure lawsuits that my community doesn't know about. The other trustee and I try to get them out on our social media, but I think the school district should have to really expose those. And I think that would go a long way in supporting parents when they're settling these six-figure lawsuits with parents, and the other community members would know that their tax dollars went to that. So I think there's a lot of things they could do, and really taking back their power and fixing lots of the issues in our school systems.
Thank you very much. It's now time for your questions, and the process that we do is we have someone who will be coming around with a microphone, so don't ask your question until the person hands you the microphone. Please make sure it's a question. Thank you. All right.
Hi, I'm from Midland, Texas, and we've got a lot of issues there. The school is an issue, and every time they start talking about DEI and CRT, they change the names of the programs. And I think that the State Board of Education, since you've been talking about it, should have people going out to schools randomly, unexpectedly, and checking on things to see if they're in cooperation with the law, the laws.
No, you're right the first time.
Huh?
You're right the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I'm just sick about this. But now I have a challenge for you too. You've done a great job with what you've done. Now I want you to start working on the public libraries. In our city, and I don't know if it's like that in everything, the county commissioner court is over the public library. We have a judge who's actually a friend of mine that's in charge of it. And after Lano got sued, and it's still sitting in the 5th District Court, he's scared to do anything about our public libraries. We have gone in, a group of us, a lot of them are homeschool moms who stumbled across this stuff in the library with their kids. And they're going in and they're finding the books, really, really awful books. And he won't do anything about it because he's afraid of getting sued. The librarian is Hispanic. He's afraid if he fires her for not doing the job she's supposed to, she'll pull the race card. So we need a law for the libraries too. Can you please work on that? I know you've got other jobs, but we need a law to get the books out of the library. We weren't even allowed to move them 100 feet across the room out of the little kids' children's section across the hall to the adult section. And I'm sick about this, and we need help out there in the fields. I mean, it's one thing to sit there and talk about, oh, we're doing this, but they aren't following the rules out there. In the middle of Texas, they're not following the rules, they're doing what they want to do. So I think there's got to be consequences. Can you help with that?
I would just add that we all collectively talk about taking our country back, right? Everyone in this room has said that we have to do that. There is no better way, and of course, we're going to work every way we can on making a change in the White House, getting a Congress that can pass a balanced budget, which hasn't happened since Clinton. But taking your country back is taking your school board back. Taking your school board back, taking your county commissioner's court back, addressing these issues at the local level, because at the end of the day, these are each levels of government. And yes, the state created the federal government, created the counties, created the cities, created the school districts. But the local voters have to rise up on those issues when something like that is happening with a county asset. As Representative Patterson has worked to clean up and root that out of our public schools, that is the whole different conversation on how we come in and some say overreach, some not. But when we're all about local control, but the things you're talking about, we have to act when there's local out of control. And conservatives and grassroots and the advocates here and across this state, they're demanding it. So thank you for bringing that forward.
So there was discussion about the State Board of Education, what they should do. Do you know who the State Board of Education is? Do you know who's on it? And if not, should we not take more care in who we elect to be on the State Board of Education?
Yeah, so I'm running for State Board of Education. Yeah. I will say, before I was a trustee, I didn't know who my State Board of Education member was. And then when we started having issues in our district, and we started looking to our representative, I found out there was this thing called a State Board of Education. I was like, well, what do they do? And I was like, oh, well, this is what they do, and they're kind of important. But I really do believe it was a concerted effort to have us not know who the State Board of Education was. And these people, even my own State Board of Education member that I'm running against, was used to getting elected without having anybody run against them. There's only 15 members. I have 27 counties in Texas. We all represent about 1.9 million people. So other than statewide elected officials, I believe we're all the second largest districts, much larger than a Senate or a House. So I cross even Congress level, federal level, it's bigger districts. So it's hard to get to know these people, but it is time to reach out to them, find out who your member is. There's only 15 of them. They were redistricted, and now it is, I believe it's a 9-6 board, 9 Republicans. We are by party, so it's 9-6. But you need to know who yours is, or maybe all 15 of them, who the chairman is and how it works. The chairman is appointed by the governor. They do have, very important committees like the Permanent School Fund, and you need to know what that is. It's a $54 billion, I think it's $57 billion actually now, it kind of varies, but it's a huge fund. I think it's the second largest fund of its type in the country. So the SBOE is over that, so you need to know what it does, and you need to demand that they support your local school board members, because there is a concerted effort. You talk about taking back local government, but there is an effort, even by the cronies, that when you get a true conservative that on your local school board, they're going to work to get them off. And I've witnessed it, I've been a part of it firsthand, had great people like TPPF help us get our story out so that we could stand, and honestly just put on the full armor of God, and that's how I've stood, and my friend Danielle. So yeah, you absolutely need to know who your State Board of Education member. If you don't know who they are, go Google them right now, go figure out who they are, email them, say hi, and I'm gonna start knowing who you are and get to know them.
And I would just add that there are conservatives running for school boards all over this state and winning, right? We are taking our school boards back. You're one of them, as you ran for the Round Rock ISD. Right now you're running for SBOE. So there are incredible changes happening, but we have to step on the gas, and we have to do everything we can with fortitude on the days that we feel like giving up. We have to keep working forward right in our community as close as it gets to your home, not just as far away as it gets to Washington, D.C.
And the SBOE has public meetings. You can show up and directly address them when they're meeting and considering policy. Our Next Generation Texas team does that pretty frequently. So figure out when those meetings are and show up and let your voice be heard in front of the board.
And you talk about enforcing CRT in K through 12. If a CRT infraction happens, there's a portal that's created where that can be reported. What those portals show is that if a superintendent is part of a district that broke statute on CRT and critical race theory and it's being taught, then that superintendent should be called into the State Board of Education public hearing for the entire state online and in person to call that superintendent to the mat. And by 9:30 a.m. that morning after that 9 o'clock hearing, all 1,200 plus superintendents in this state would have an attitude adjustment.
I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I spend anywhere from 20 to 30 hours a week volunteering in education. And so I am very familiar with the State Board of Education. And I actually know Dr. Bone's opponent personally. His name is Tom Maynard. And he is an amazing person. He is very conservative. He does not follow the money. And he actually crafted a parental right amendment for the State Board of Education. He has worked very closely with us on making sure that our kids are protected. He supported Representative Patterson's TSLAC guidelines. And so I'm a little disappointed to hear the way that he is being portrayed. And Representative Patterson, I just wanted to say that I supported HB 900. You did an amazing job. You were very brave because you were being attacked from many different directions. I appreciate the commitment to doing that, and thank you so much. The only thing I would ask is we have gone to our local LISD, and we have said, in the HB 900, it specifically defines sexually explicit.
Yes.
So even though the portion that's going through the courts is still in limbo, do you believe that they should have to wait for that. I mean, they should know, right, what needs to be removed and what does not, according to the bill.
No, 100%. I mean, there is a definition of sexually explicit that refers back to parts of the penal code and other areas of the law, that if you were to take all the references and spell them out on a piece of paper, it's about 3/4 of a page. It's very specific. The problem that we have in a lot of these school boards is that they go to these TASB conferences and they get indoctrinated themselves with these awful attorneys that have these, I mean, I don't even know how they're attorneys because, I mean, I'm not an attorney, and I very clearly understood that when TASB had the ACLU up at their conference last year, training school board members on how to go against HB 900 and other laws that we passed, they weren't even, it wasn't even sound legal policy. Like all you would have to do is read the dissenting opinion from the court case from about 40 years ago, the PICO case, to understand that what we said in HB 900 is in fact what everybody believed on the Supreme Court. That wasn't the issue in that case that they always wanted to reference. They reference removing a book because of the ideas in the book, not because of the explicit content. And one of the most far-left Supreme Court justices in history that is idolized by the left, who wrote the opinion, even said there is no constitutional right to obscene content. And so I think that a lot of these school board members get in there, and I think that they get indoctrinated. I think that they're well-meaning. I think that they're fearful of the left, of being canceled. And I think that they listen to these attorneys without reading the items themselves, like Dr. Bone said, and they just don't make the right decision there. But I think that what's incumbent upon us as conservatives is that we need to force this issue to the point where these locally elected officials fear the right as much as they fear the left. And of course, I don't mean physical harm, but they need to understand that we are going to hold them accountable if they're going to continue to promote this filth to our children. And they don't feel that way right now. All of the fear is to the left about getting canceled. They need to fear us, they need to respect us, and they better expect us at all the school board meetings if they don't.
Why aren't they accountable now?
Thank you.
Why are they getting away with it now?
You want the honest answer?
Yes.
Because 7% of the voters show up in a school board election. That's why they're not accountable. They run around with 7% of the population, of the voting population, voting in these local elections that are held in May, and nobody knows it. Everybody's tired of the primary and the runoff of the primary and all these things going on. And meanwhile, there's these local elections where 7 to 9% of the turnout is out there, and it's in my area, it's this trifecta of, you know, kind of your local elites that vote in these boards and in these elections,
So
and nobody else does. Go ahead.
I'll take this a little bit because actually our elections are November. Our school board, before I was on there, moved ours to November. I was actually elected in 2020 during the Trump election. So obviously we had a lot of voters. I can't stress this enough. What happens, and you were talking about conservatives get elected, but then if you follow them, they resign. Good people like me do not stay on boards, and I'm not trying to build myself up. I'm not trying to be self-promoting at all. All glory to my God, because it's the only reason I'm still here. My name has been dragged through the mud. You even heard in here, there's local people that do not like me because I have fought. And then my name gets smeared locally, and then nobody wants to stand with you, because the right, by the way, the right wants heroes. They want people that put on capes, and they want Superman. Superman's not coming, y'all. Superman doesn't exist. These two gentlemen, you're not Superman, are you? No. You do kind of look like it. I mean, you guys have done really great things.
I've had my suspicions for a long time.
Yeah, I know. If you're gonna do it, now's the time to uncape here. They're not Superman, but they want Superman or Superwomen. And Danielle and I, the other trustee on the board, we have stood. Leander, right next to us, they have one conservative board member who has stood by himself, and you should go read what they've done to him. Y'all, there's 2 of us on our board. There's Chad Green and McKinney. We have like an underground network because we all support each other. You have a couple of them in Frisco ISD. These people were elected. But it is so hard. It's a supernatural hard to stay on, and lots of them resign. For one thing, because they don't have the support after they're elected. So they need support after they're elected, but they also need, we are the group. Republicans believe in law and order, and we believe, and so when we go and we push all the buttons, and we go to our county attorney, and we go to our legislators, and we go to TEA, and when nobody will help us, we resign. What else are you supposed to do? We try to go find an island. We move. I can tell you in my district what my folks have done. They moved. All the Republicans are moving out of Round Rock ISD because they're like, why get people elected and then they're just going to resign? So we've got to restore law and order so that when you get conservatives, as an elected official, I should be able to serve on my board. I have a list of 80, over 80 probably now, laws that have been broken. I cannot get anybody to take them up. I can't get Paxton. Nobody wants, y'all, I love Paxton, but nobody wants to take on the school districts. He finally is. He finally has ventured into this with the electioneering for whatever reason, God bless him. But before that, nobody wants to take on, our superintendent has a permanent restraining order for family violence against his pregnant mistress. And the reason our school district keeps him is because he wasn't charged. You wanna know where this all happened? You're sitting in the county. Jose Garza, go look at him. Who's he backed by? Soros. So I have a superintendent. The only reason he's my superintendent, I guess, is because a Soros-backed DA would not prosecute him. This is not law and order. Why is he still there? Why does TEA allow him to be there? SBEC, that's the State Board of Educators Certification. Why is this being allowed? There's so many things that are broken in our system. The system is not working at all. And trustees like me, we give up and we go back to our families and we go back to our day job and we go into the, and we pull our kids out and take them to private school. But, some of us have decided to stay and fight.
First sentence, I was a senator in Illinois at one time. We found the most powerful weapon we had in dealing with school districts and teachers unions were tenure. And it's hard to believe, but at one point, Illinois abolished teacher tenure back in the 1990s when we were still a red-leaning purple state rather than now the communist dictatorship of Illinois. But we actually removed tenure. They have since put it back, but if you want a cudgel to use, have you ever thought of using teacher tenure? Because you do away with that and you have just changed the entire world.
Yes, I'll just add, at the higher education level, we went after tenure for the last 2 sessions. It took 2 sessions, but last session we implemented, the House and the Senate came together with a bill that was essentially the Aggies. A&M had the best practices in the state of Texas for a true removal of a professor under cause, for just cause, that had real definitions. And under that framework, A&M has been removing leftist, Marxist, radical, disrupting professors that other universities around the state have allowed to continue under a framework that tenure overall protects. So we did revise and reform tenure in a way that I think will be a model for the country.
Yeah, I just want to add to that, before I don't know how much time we have, but I think we could all in this room agree that Texas A&M is the greatest university on the face of the planet.
We might need another panel. Yeah. It's an excellent university.
I don't think we have tenure at the
K through 12, we don't have. I mean, what we do have is we have, for the last 10 years, 76 more administrators hired, 76% more administrators hired in K through 12, and in that same 10-year period, we have 6% increase in teachers being hired. So where is all the money going? It's going to administration, which is why Beaumont ISD was taken over by the state, El Paso ISD was taken over by the state, while now Houston ISD was taken over by the state. In Houston ISD alone, Miles removed 2,400 administrative positions in his first 2 weeks, and the school district's running better just since that happened, right? So there is accountability, there is action being taken by the state like never before, and we are using laws that we have on the books, but we are now activating and enforcing those laws, again, at every level. With DEI alone, there is a defunding clause for every university that relaunches, renames, and reauthorizes DEI under a different title, right? So that is the only bill in the country that does that. That kind of enforcement and accountability is making people that never took notice before pay attention. And at K through 12, we're going to hold that same accountability standard on them for their budgets as we design a curriculum that I mentioned before that will get woke out of the classroom, that will be based on reading, writing, and arithmetic, and get rid of reading methods that we knew were bad in 1983, right? Throw those in the garbage, right? And we are not just shoving $1 billion to public schools across the state saying, use it as you will. We are saying you will adopt this curriculum, it is funded, and if you don't get the money. That is a change in the landscape of Texas education that gets us back to way before, decades ago, when the ACLU and all these other radical organizations started incrementally eroding our system of common sense that we all, as moms and dads, had in place and felt comfortable with.
I'm afraid we're out of time. Please join me in thanking our guests.